I wonder, young fellow, if you've seen my dog. I was going for a walk, but Rex seems to have grown tired of waiting.
Your dog? No, sir, I haven't seen it. Shall I go and look?
No, never mind, he'll come back. Rex and I understand each other. He has his little moods, much like me.
If you were going for a walk,
It doesn't matter at all. I can go any time. Do you live in this county?
no, sir, I wish I did. I live in a suburb called Kenton. It's beautiful here, isn't it?
It's very beautiful to me. I love it. You may have come a long way this morning. Let's sit down.
Thank you. I'm not interfering with anything.
Bless your heart. No, indeed. What is there to interfere with? All we have is life, and this is part of it.
I like to sit under these trees. It makes me think of the Old Testament.
That's interesting. How?
Well, maybe I'm wrong, but whenever I think of the Old Testament, I see an old man under a tree.
Yes.
A man who's lived it all through, and found out something real about it. And he sits there, calm and strong, something like a tree himself. And every once in a while, somebody comes along. A boy.
A boy much like yourself?
That's right. And the boy talks to him all about himself, just as we imagine we'd like to talk with our fathers if they weren't so busy, or our teachers if they didn't depend so much upon books, or our ministers if we thought they would really understand. And the old man doesn't say much, maybe, but the boy goes away much stronger and happier.
Yes. Yes, I understand. The Old Testament. They did get hold of things, didn't they?
What I can't understand is how nowadays people seem more grown up and competent than those men were in a way, and we do such wonderful things, electronic machines and spaceships, and yet we aren't half so wonderful as they were in the Old Testament with their jugs and wooden ploughs.
What do you mean?
I mean, we aren't nearly so big as the things we do, while those old fellows were so much bigger. We smile at them, but if someday one of our machines fell over on us, what would we do about it?
I wonder.
I went through a big factory just last week. One of my friend's father is the manager, and all I could think of was what could a fellow do who didn't like it, who didn't fit in?
That's a thought.
Nowadays, nearly everybody seems competent about factories or business or something like that, and they've got hold of everything. So a fellow's got to do the same thing. Or where is he?
That's the first question, certainly. Where is he? But where is he if he does do the same thing?
Why, he's with the rest. And they don't ask that question.
I'm afraid they don't. It would be interesting to be there if they should begin to ask it, wouldn't it?
Yes, I'd like to be there when some I know ask themselves. But they never will. Why should they?
Don't you mean, how can they?
Yes, of course. They don't ask the question because the big thing they are doing seems to be the answer beforehand. But it isn't, not compared with the Old Testament. So we have to ask it for ourselves. And that's why I came here.
Ah, you want to know where they are with their power, or where you will be without it.
Where I'll be. I hate it. But what else is there today?
Why, there's you.
But that's just it. What am I for if I can't join in? I came to you. You don't mind my talking, do you?
On the contrary,
Well, everybody I know is a part of it. So how could they tell me what to do outside of it? I've been wondering about that for a year. Before then, when I was just a young boy, and the world seemed full of everything, but now it seems to have only one thing, that or nothing.
is that how you feel?
That's how I felt. Then one day I saw a photograph somebody had cut out of a Sunday paper, and I thought to myself, there's a man who seems outside, entirely outside, and yet he has something. It wasn't all or nothing for him, and I wondered who it was.
And then,
Then I found your book with the same picture in it. I read it right off. It was the first time in my life I had ever felt power as great as robots and skyrockets, and yet apart from them, outside of all they mean, like the Old Testament. Those poems.
you liked them?
It was more than that. How can a fellow like the ocean or a snowstorm?
Is that what you thought they were like?
Why, they went off like a 14-inch gun. Not a whine about life in them, not a single regret for anything. They were wonderful. They seemed to pick up mountains and cities and toss them all about like toys.
Really?
Oh, yes. They made me feel that what I was looking for was able to conquer what I didn't like. I said to myself, I don't care if he does laugh at me. I'll go and ask him where all that power is. And so I came.
Ah, there's Rex now over the road. He's wondering who you are. He sees we are friends and he's pretending to be jealous. Ducks are funny, aren't they?
They are indeed.
You were speaking about my poems. It's odd that their first criticism should come from you, like this. You must be about the same age I was when I began writing.
I suppose.
The age when I wanted above anything to write a book like that. And when such a book seemed the most impossible thing I could do, like trying to swim the Atlantic or live forever.
It seemed impossible. I should think it would be the most natural thing in the world for you, like eating dinner.
That's the wonderful thing. Not the book, but that I should have come to write it.
But who else could write it?
Your age, I thought anybody could. Anybody and everybody, except myself.
Really?
Really and truly. You've no idea what a useless misfit I was.
But I read somewhere you had always been brilliant, even as a boy.
Unfortunately, yes. That was what made it so hard for me. Shall I tell you about it?
I wish you would.
Brilliance. I'll tell you what that was, at least for me. I wrote several things that people called brilliant. One in particular, a little play of decadent epigram. It was acted by amateurs before an admiring select audience. That was when I was 21. From about 16 on, I had been acutely miserable, physically miserable.
Oh,
I never knew when I wouldn't actually cave in. I felt like a bankrupt living on borrowed money. Of course, it's plain enough now, the revolt of starved nerves. I cared only for my mind, grew only in that, and the rest of me withered up like a stalk in dry soil. So the flower drooped too. In decadent epigram. But nobody pointed out the truth of it all to me, and I scorned to give my body a thought.
What were people saying?
People predicted a brilliant future. For me, crying inside. Then I married. I married the girl who had taken the star part in the play. According to the logic of the situation, it was inevitable. Everybody remarked how inevitable it was.
What sort of girl was she?
A decorative girl, you know. She wanted to be the wife of a great man. Well, we didn't get along. There was an honest streak in me somewhere which hated deception. I couldn't play the part of brilliant young poet with any success. She was at me all the time to write more of the same thing, and I didn't want to. And the difference between the great man I was supposed to be and the sick child I really was began to torture. I knew I oughtn't to go on any further if I wanted to do anything real.
Don't go on if you don't want to.
I don't mind. One night we had an artistic dinner. My wife had gotten hold of a famous English poet, and through him, a publisher.
Famous poet? Which one?
Oh, I forget. The publisher was her real game. I drank champagne before dinner so as to be brilliant. I was. And before I realised it, Nora had secured a promise from the publisher to bring out a book of plays. I remember she said it was practically finished. But it wasn't, only the one, and I hated that.
So, what did you do?
I sat down conscientiously to write the book that she, and apparently all the world that counted, expected me to write.
How far did you get?
Not a blessed word. Something inside of me refused to work. And there I was. In a month or so, she began to ask about it. Nora thought I ought to turn them out while she waited.
What happened?
I walked up and down the park one afternoon, wondering what to tell her. When I realised that either she would never understand or would despise me, I grew desperate.
Desperate? What did you do?
I wrote her a note full of fine phrases about incompatibility, her unapproachable ideals, the soul's need of freedom, things she would understand and wear a heroic attitude about, and fled. I came here.
Of course.
Nora preferred her lonely heroism. In a few months I was quite forgotten. That was one of the healthful things I learned. Well, I was a wreck when I came here. I wanted only to lie down under a tree. And there it was, under that tree yonder. My salvation came.
Your salvation?
Hunger. That was my salvation. Simple, elemental, unescapable appetite. You see, I had no servant, no one at all. So I had to get up and work to prepare my food. It was very strange. Compared with this life, my life before had been like living in a locked box. Someone to do everything for me, except think. Consequently, I thought too much.
But when you came here, things were different.
Oh, yes, here the very fact of life was brought home to me. I spent weeks working about the house and grounds on the common necessities. By the time winter came, the place was fit to live in, and I was enjoying life. All the brilliance had faded away. I was as simple as a blade of grass.
And your writing?
For a year, I didn't write a word. I had the courage to wait for the real thing. Nobody pestering me to be a genius. Someday you may read that first book. People said I had rediscovered the virtue of humility. I had.
I will read it. And how much more it will mean to me now.
I suppose you know the theory about vibrations. How, if a little push is given a bridge and repeated often enough at the right intervals, the bridge will fall?
Yes.
Well, that's the whole secret of what you've been looking for, what you've found in my poems.
I don't understand.
A man's life is a rhythm. Eating, sleeping, working, playing, loving, thinking, everything. And when we live so that each activity comes at the right interval, we gain power. When one interrupts another, we lose.
How would you describe weakness?
Weakness is merely the thrust of one impulse against another, instead of their combined thrust against the world.
I think I'm beginning to understand.
When I came here, feeling like a criminal, I was obeying the one right instinct in a welter of emotions. It was like the faintest of heartbeats in a sick body. I listened to that. And then I learned physical hunger, then sleep, and so on. It's incredible how stupid I was about the elemental art of living. I had to begin all over from the beginning, as if no one had ever lived before.
That's what you meant in your poems about religion.
Exactly. I learnt that good is the rhythm of the man's personal nature and that evil is merely the confusion of the same impulses. As time went on, it became instinctive to live for and by the rhythm. Everything about my life here was caught up and used in the vision of power. Drawing water, cutting wood, digging in the garden. It was all marvellous. I couldn't help writing those poems. They are the natural joys and sorrows of 10 years. As a matter of fact, though, I grew to care less and less about writing as living became fuller and richer. People write too much. They would write less if they had to make the fire in the morning.
The first impulse. I see. Oh, life might be so simple.
Why not? The animals have it. Men have it at times, but we make each other forget. If we could only be each other's reminders instead of forgetters.
But I see the only thing to do is to go away, like you.
Not necessarily. I was merely a bad case and required a desperate remedy, earth and air and freedom from others' will. I need the country, but the next man might require a suburb just as passionately. Don't imagine that only the hermits like me live instinctively.
But could I live instinctively in a suburb like Kenton?
It can be done in Kenton too. Only one mustn't be so sensitive to others. After all, friend, we were wrong in saying that this power lies outside the world of electronics and business. It doesn't lie outside nor inside. It cuts across everything. Do you see? For it's all a matter of the man's own soul.
Then,
We can't live in a vacuum. The more you feel the force, the more you must act. The more you can act. And in the long run, it doesn't matter what you do if you do what your own instincts bids.
then I could stay right in the midst of
Sorry. Yes, and if you were thinking of writing poetry, it might even be better to stay in the midst of it. Drama, you know. And it's time for a new drama.
Isn't that with me? I can't write.
But I'm sure you went to a good school.
I went to Harrow County, where I had one splendid teacher. He used to talk about things right in class. He said that most educated people think that intellect is a matter of making fine distinctions, of seeing as two separate points what the unintelligent would believe was one point, but that this idea was finicky.
Go on. This is fascinating.
This teacher wanted us to see that intelligence might also be a matter of seeing the connection between two things so far apart that most people would think they were always separate. I like that. It made education mean something because it made it depend on imagination instead of grubbing.
It's good to hear of a teacher treating his pupils as intelligent beings.
Oh, yes. He told us about the history of our subject, grammar, how it began as poetry, when every word was an original creation, and then became philosophy, as people had to arrange speech with thought, and then science, with more or less exact laws.
Everything ends in science. Indeed.
I could see it. The thing became alive. And he said all knowledge passed through the same stages. And there isn't anything that can't eventually be made scientific. That made me think a good deal.
About anything in particular?
Yes. I wondered if somebody couldn't work out a way of preventing anybody from being poor. It seems so unnecessary. There's so much work being done. That's what I want to do. Thanks to you,
Here's Rex. Rex! No, my good friend, I know you will like him. Rex always cares for the people I do. Don't you, Rex?
Of course, I see one thing. It's the people nearest one that make the most difference. Mother now, she will understand. You don't believe in marrying, though, do you?
I certainly do.
But I thought that...
You thought, because I left one woman and hadn't found another, that I didn't care for women. Others believe that too, but it isn't so. On the contrary, you see, I didn't so much leave her as get away from my own failure.
Is there such a thing as the wrong woman?
Of course there is. She makes a man a fraction. The better she is in herself, the less she leaves him to live by. 1/20th is less than 1/2. But the right woman, she multiplies a man.
Oh,
Why, you might have told from my poems how I believe in love.
I don't remember any love poems.
Bless your heart. Every one of them was a love poem. Not the old-fashioned kind about fading roses and tender hearts. I sent that book out as a cry for the mate. It is charged with the fullness of love. That's why I could write about trees and storms.
I suppose if I had been older...
It isn't one's age, but one's need. She will understand. Look, the sun has gone round the corner of the house. Is that lunch you have in the parcel?
Yes,
Would you like to make it a picnic? I'll get something from the house and then we can walk to the woods.
I'd love to.
All right. I'll be ready in no time. Come, Rex.